Well, hello and welcome to the Unlocking Workplace Wellbeing podcast for HR managers and business owners, where we talk about workplace wellbeing to make everyone's lives better. That's including yours and mine. I'm Stephen Pink, CEO of Verve Healthcare, and my guest in this episode is a workplace menopause expert, Helen Bennett. Helen, welcome.
Thank you, Stephen. Lovely to be here.
I'm really pleased you could join us. And when I told people we're going to have a chat about menopause and particularly in relation to the workplace, they all said what an important area it was. What do you think's changed? Why is it suddenly so, or seemingly suddenly so high on people's agenda?
Well, in my opinion, it's long overdue that people are talking about this. And I think it's really been happening since 2021 when Davina McCall did a film with Channel 4, Sex Myths and the Menopause, which really got women talking. A lot of people started thinking about whether some of the things that they were experiencing with their body or their mind was perhaps linked to their hormones. And it really started that conversation happening. It impacts everything. It really does. And yeah, we pretend it doesn't because women spend a lot of their time pretending that they're not women at work because they have to. And yeah, whereas this is something that really impacts everything. And I often work, particularly with my therapy clients, it's menopause really just highlights whatever the cracks are. You know, if there's a crack in the relationship that's just been pasted over, well, you know, getting the children through school or whatever it might be, menopause is often a thing that just makes, you know, women can't cope anymore. They can't cope with pretending. They can't mask in the same way. They can't, you know, they need to find some time for themselves. They can't, you know, have imbalance in relationships where men go off and do their regular exercise and women actually just don't get the chance to go to the gym or whatever it might be. There's a reckoner that happens where whether it's work that's too stressful and, you know, women take on more and more and more and more at work and the menopause suddenly says, that's enough. You know, you're going to notice there's going to be physical impacts. There's going to be, you know, I work with a lot of senior women and they are stressed and the stress really has an impact on their menopause symptoms.
As managers and leaders, we've got to be comfortable, particularly us men, we've got to be comfortable talking about stuff which is largely, but not solely, kind of female oriented and be comfortable being uncomfortable as we learn how to navigate that with our colleagues and the people who work with them for us. Is that, I mean, do men struggle with that, or is that once you kind of get in the right headspace, does it tend to be okay?
I think it's just that. It's getting into the headspace. It's getting used to talking about it. It's accessing enough training that it doesn't feel weird to talk about what might be happening. It obviously, menopause impacts half the population. So it's something that everyone's mothers have gone through, men's sisters, daughters, partners may have gone through. So it's happening. And I think the more that we talk about it, the more that shame is reduced. So the more that men are trained, the more that it comes up in conversation, the more that if, you know, a company is looking at reasonable adjustments that they could be making, that menopause comes into it, I think is really important because so many women don't even talk to their managers about it at work. They just don't want to. They feel too much shame.
Going back to on the technical stuff for a second, the Employment Rights Bill proposes that companies employing, I think it's 250 people or more, should develop a specific plan to support people experiencing menopause or women experiencing menopause. Is it women, or is it, because that has an impact on men as well in the workplace, isn't there?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's women, anyone who's assigned female at birth. So there's trans men will experience menopause as well. And obviously it impacts anybody who has a woman in their life. There may be some impact on menopause from that. So often, certainly in the therapy side of my work, I've supported people who aren't women going through menopause, but are experiencing the impact of what's happening, perhaps if women in their lives things are changing for them.
So if we've got organisations with 250 more people, so the law's changing, we've got to have a proper plan. What kind of adjustments are you recommending, or do you think HR managers and employers should make, or at least think about?
So I think there's a couple of things here. Firstly, it's having the guidance and making sure that it's there, but then it's actually doing more than just paying lip service to it, which is something that I hear quite a lot that employers do, is that they have a menopause policy, but actually women experiencing menopause, and I'll obviously use women because it's the majority of people as my terms as I'm talking, but people experiencing menopause will, you know, often find that their workplace has a menopause policy and yet still nobody's really talking about it. So developing the guidance and the policy is absolutely the first stage, making sure that you've got that so that there's a specific advice guidance as to what what sort of things, what adjustments the employers can offer, guidance from managers if people in their teams are talking to them about menopause or how it might be impacting them, knowing what support, whether there's occupational health support, whether there is somewhere to signpost to counselling or signposting to any medical support that might be available in that organisation. And linking as well with that policy guidance to flexible working policies, diversity and inclusion policies, whatever else that you might have that's relevant within your organisation. So that's the first guidance, is to have that policy so that people are aware what can be done. Communicate it regularly, make sure that it's not something that's just created, shared, and then archived in everyone's inboxes and never seen again. Ensuring that absence management performance policies are fair, and that if somebody is experiencing menopause, really think about how that might impact their performance in work or their ability to be present in work. And that's very important. Educating and training line managers, so the ability to make sure people understand what those symptoms might be, because there's such a huge range of menopause symptoms. One person's experience of menopause is not going to be the same as somebody else's. So, and for a lot of people, they don't realise it's menopause until quite a long way along the perimenopause part of menopause, the menopause transition. So being aware of that to make sure that women aren't being penalised for something that is a change that is beyond their control. Ensuring that the culture has an openness towards vulnerabilities or other reasons why somebody might be experiencing physical issues or mental health issues at work, and that the culture is open and allows conversations about it. Menopause support networks or menopause cafes can be amazing places for women to talk to each other about what's happening for them, and also then educate themselves about different menopause experiences, and then be able to spot things in other people in their teams or people around them. Kind of access to fresh drinking water, which in some places is difficult to find, or outside space for temperature regulation, or just the emotional regulation you can get in the outdoors, making sure people have breaks, that there might be a breakout room in an employment situation that where people perhaps are in a very intense working environment, to be able to just break out and regulate for a few minutes can make all the difference to somebody who's experiencing difficult menopause symptoms. In terms of adjustments, that is the most important is flexible working. So being able to provide flexibility to do with where somebody works or how somebody works, or perhaps workload, and providing reasonable adjustments to workload can make all the difference. That's often the top of the list of things that women in menopause report being helpful at work. Things like if somebody's really experiencing sleep disturbances, being able to come in a little bit later and work a little bit later, or manage around, where possible within a job role, to manage their workload or the times that they work around how menopause is impacting them, could be huge.
Sorry, I was thinking about the what you're saying about the kind of peer-to-peer conversations, and thinking about our own organisation, about how we always need to create a very safe environment for both managers and colleagues to talk about menopause. It's not kind of a taboo.
Yeah.
Is that peer-to-peer support, how important is that?
Really important. I think that's amazing. To be able to have those conversations, for managers to be able to have difficult conversations, to be approachable, and for employers or employees in their team to know that they are not going to be laughed out of the room or be shamed or have assumptions made about them because of their menopause. I mean, just like many other reasons that somebody might need reasonable adjustments at work to do with disabilities or to do with ill health, it's similar in the same way, but menopause has had a special kind of taboo around it, to do with aging, to do with how women often experience menopause. Yes, hot flushes is the thing that people talk about, and often insomnia, but actually there is much more incidence of people experiencing mental health effects like brain fog, which really impacts them in the workplace. So 70% of women experience hot flushes, but we think of it as 100%. So often women might say, well, I'm not going through menopause, I haven't had any hot flushes.
Right.
But actually not every woman has hot flushes. Some women only have a few. Some women have 30, 50 a day. Some women have lots of night sweats, some women don't. It really depends how their body is reacting to the drops in estrogen that they're experiencing.
Talking about how things are changing and managers need to be comfortable speaking about things that perhaps weren't comfortable to talk about before. And just thinking about different parts of the population and different types of communities within the population. Are the statistics different? For example, if you're from a different type of background, how does that kind of work?
Yes, so absolutely. Those people who are from working class backgrounds often experience worse menopause symptoms. I suspect it
Really?
may be to do with stress, but they will often experience worse menopause symptoms. And those from ethnic minority backgrounds and LGBTQIA plus people are more likely to not mention it at work and not talk to their managers about it. And those people with long-term health conditions will also find that menopause impacts them worse, and therefore they are more likely to end up being discriminated against at work. So it's something for managers to be aware of.
So we need to get on top of it, don't we, and make sure that doesn't happen in the places we lead.
Yeah, absolutely. And make sure that if you have employees who are in those groups, have more risk of being marginalised, that you're more aware of how menopause might be impacting them if it's something that's coming up, and encouraging them to be able to talk about it.
Okay, thank you. And think about maybe some specific examples. I know your own background in HR leadership is working in high growth companies, and maybe without being specific on the organisation, are you able to share examples where you've perhaps helped someone who's been struggling with menopause symptoms, and what were you able to do to help them along?
Yes, of course. So most of my HR and people work was in organisations that didn't have a lot of menopausal aged women of the average age of menopause. And just for clarification, the average age in the Western world is 51, but 12 over 12% of people have menopause before this, between an early menopause between 40 and 45, and 1 in 100 women has POI, premature ovarian insufficiency, which is a natural menopause before 40. And there can be many more reasons for that. So, chemical menopause or surgical menopause, or there's lots of different reasons why somebody may experience menopause before that. So that's something also for employers to be aware of, because I see a lot in menopause policies that they're really based around women in their 50s. And yet actually hormone issues, POI, it can really impact, and all of those menopause symptoms can be happening to women at any age after puberty. So I've worked with people who have POI who really experience discrimination at work because their employers say that the menopause policy doesn't apply to them. And yet they're having
Really?
exactly the same experience because their ovaries aren't working and their hormones are fluctuating. So that's
So there's
something
so much to
to be
watch
aware
out
of.
for, isn't there?
Yeah. So it's not just about people in their 50s. It really is at any age. And you can have a later menopause. So some people are still having periods into their late 50s, and they might be having a later menopause, which can also acquire its own types of discrimination from workplaces and medics. When things aren't, yeah, a lot of the things that we have are geared to the average, and yet average menopause is just like puberty. Everyone starts at different times.
So we talked a bit about the individual who's experiencing menopause. You think about maybe the wider team for a second.
Yeah.
There can be impact on teams, and perhaps sometimes team members might struggle with it, maybe for some of the reasons that we've talked about. What, in your experience with your expertise, what can you say to teams management so they would know kind of what to do to help the team as a whole?
I think, like any reasonable adjustment that we might be needing to, if somebody is having a change in their life that requires a different working pattern or a different set of circumstances at work, the more that teams can be open and communicate about it if it feels appropriate, the more supportive and empathetic then teams will be with the person who needs the extra support. As we talked about earlier, if managers are comfortable using all of the language around menopause, if they're comfortable being able to talk about it, not everybody will want their team members knowing that they're going through menopause, because of that stigma and shame that we've talked about before. And there can be a lot of emotional impact of menopause for women going through it. And they may not think that it was going to happen to them yet. They may not be ready for it. There's a whole grieving process that can go around for some women around the loss of fertility and the aging process generally. Not everybody will want to talk about it. So being able to have those conversations with the person in question, if it is impacting the team, to be working out how they want to, they feel comfortable with their situation being communicated or not communicated. And then really making sure that the workplace, the team has a culture of support and empathy, and recognizing that everybody's different and everybody has challenges, because menopause is another thing that happens. It happens in life. Like sometimes team members might need time off for bereavement, or they might need time off for ill health. Just encouraging team members to react empathetically is makes a huge difference to how supported people feel at work.
I can see how that would make a big difference. Sorry,
Yeah, I was just going to say, because the stats are huge around people leaving work because of menopause. So yeah, 6% of women leave their jobs because of the menopause, and 1 in 6 consider leaving their jobs because of the menopause. I mentioned earlier about how in my people in HR experience, I didn't often see that many women who were of menopausal age or post-menopausal who were in the workplaces, particularly in the high growth startup world, which is, long working hours. A lot of high pressure working environments. It doesn't necessarily end up being something that women who are experiencing menopause symptoms want to be, an environment they want to be working in. But people are twice as likely to leave an organisation if they feel like it's not supportive of them to do with menopause. And they
Huge
are
potential loss of talent.
absolutely, yes. And, I think there's often the assumption that people are leaving to spend more time with their family or whatever the reason has been given, but actually perhaps it's to do with something that hasn't been discussed, which is the fact that they don't feel that they're being accommodated at work. They don't feel that they are able to work flexibly, or they're not able to manage they may, because if somebody's experienced a hot flush in a meeting, it may look like they're very anxious. And if they're trying to hide it, then it ends up becoming worse, because the more that you feel shame about your hot flush, the worse, the longer it lasts and the worse that it might appear to be. And if somebody just assumes that that's anxiety, then they might put a whole load of expectations or judgments upon that person and their ability to present in a meeting or whatever it might be, when actually it's to do with their hormones rather than anxiety. Although I would say, obviously, as a therapist, that we should be supporting someone if they were experiencing anxiety in those situations anyway. But there can be this impact of what people perceive is going on for somebody. Perhaps if they're late into work, or perhaps if they have brain fog, they forget something, they need different adjustments as to how meeting notes are shared, or an adjustment like that could really help them in the workplace. And they're not having it.
It strikes me as a leader, you talk about judgment, and I think it's very easy to kind of almost unconsciously get into that kind of judging situations and people's behaviours. And it's important, I guess, as leaders, that we make an effort to understand rather than judge, to actually take a moment, take a breath, and try and work out, understand what's going on before we kind of jump to conclusions.
Yeah, absolutely. I was horrified to see that 1 in 10 women reports having disciplinary action because of their menopause symptoms. It's huge. I mean, that's a lot of people who then will feel more likely to not be able to cope at work. They'll be more likely to leave the workforce, when actually, if they felt able to talk to their managers about it and their managers were supportive and empathetic, then that disciplinary action wouldn't even be happening.
And if you don't know what menopause is, I mean, we've all heard there's, she's having a hot flush, she's having a menopause, which is a bit daft, really. But it's much bigger than that. It's much more varied in terms of the experiences that women have. What are those experiences that women go through during menopause?
Absolutely. So people often think about insomnia and hot flushes as the main symptoms of menopause, but it's so much more than that, from physical symptoms to mental health symptoms to genitourinary symptoms that people have that they don't necessarily associate with menopause. So often people find that if they're in a position to start using HRT, that certain niggles that they thought were just their dodgy left knee actually end up improving, because it was all linked to estrogen, and how those estrogen receptors in your body are picking up the hormones that are left when your hormones are fluctuating. So everybody has a different experience of which symptoms that they have. And often people just think, as I say, it's their bad knee, or it's aging, or it's, I just get itchy skin, or whatever it might be. But actually, anything, your estrogen is like a lubricator in the body. So it's kind of like anything that might go creaky, aching joints can happen, or anything that involves not being as moisturized can impact, as well as thinning hair, dry taste in the mouth, metallic taste in the mouth. There is the mental health impacts of kind of brain fog, of low moods, of feeling really nervous. A lot of people experience paranoia, like a paranoia that they've never experienced before, where they perhaps, I don't know, they commute to work every day, but suddenly the thought of getting on the train makes them feel like they are incapable of doing it. They feel so paranoid about what might happen. Even if they know rationally that that's not any different, there's no more danger than there was the day before, suddenly it can hit them, and it can hit overnight. So that can be really, really terrifying for women who are just used to going to work and suddenly they don't feel able to leave the house. So yes, there's the mental health, there's increase in self-harming behaviours, there's increase in instances of body dysmorphia, there's increase in eating disorders in menopause because a lot of people gain weight and don't understand why they're gaining weight, so they restrict even more. And then, there's changes and shifts in sense of self as to how you feel, in terms of womanhood, or in terms of your fertility, in terms of aging process, femininity. It's often a time for change, for reassessment of what priorities are in life. Often women will report to me that they sort of feel these urges of, they call it the change for a reason, because it's not just a change in terms of what's happening in their body, but there's a real shift in realization of what they want. And it's just the impact of the change could be in so many different places, whether it's to do with workforce, whether it's to do with family life, whether it's a shift in priorities. Often women feel that they need to prioritize their health in a way that they haven't been able to prioritize before. And women have, typically take on a lot of responsibility. They've got a lot of things that they are caring for, and their needs often matter towards the bottom. But menopause can sometimes be a bit of a reckoner. It can show you that you've been ignoring your physical health or your mental health or your time out, your relaxation, your self-care. And menopause highlights a lot of those issues that have been kind of pasted over as women cope with things in life.
There's a lot of talk across different employers about neurodiversity, and I understand that neurodiversity has an impact on menopause or vice versa, and can amplify some of what goes on. Are you able to explain a bit about that for us?
We've got the physical symptoms, but then we've got the mental health symptoms like brain fog and mood issues and forgetfulness and feeling like you are dropping balls all the time, and emotional lability, so having those emotions close to the surface, hot flashes of anger, those sorts of things are often, if you looked at a list of condition of symptoms that somebody with ADHD might experience and somebody with menopause might experience, there's a lot of crossover. So what happens for women who have been coping with neurodivergence, perhaps undiagnosed neurodivergence, because there's a much greater instance of diagnosis at the moment in women is either in teenage years or in menopausal years as to when they're most likely to be diagnosed with ADHD or autism. And that is because those symptoms are very similar. So a lot of women find excellent coping strategies as they're going through perhaps school, perhaps university, the workplace. If the wheels fall off a little bit, they find a new coping strategy. They find another way of managing it. And then in menopause, everything just gets amplified. And so it becomes much harder to manage those coping strategies. And so women who have both things going on find that their brain fog gets lots worse, that their forgetfulness, they just feel like they're trying to juggle too many things. And of course, let's not forget that if we're even just thinking about the average age of menopause, these days, there's been a real shift in the last few generations about what women are typically doing at 51 or in that average menopause age of 45 to 55, because they may well have children at home, sometimes small children at home. They may well have aging parents who need support. They may have be dual income families. Most families are dual income now. There's not the ability for somebody in menopause to put their feet up in the afternoon if they're feeling a little bit more tired. So all of these things, there's greater pressures on women. There's much more stresses in their life. And there's such a big link between physiological stress, mental health stress, and the level of the symptoms that you will experience in menopause. And if you're then adding neurodivergence and trying to cope in a world that has increasing demands and increasing lack of regulation opportunities, then that can really impact women going through menopause much more.
I guess that just highlights the importance for us, business leaders, if you like, business owners, to we're not going to become experts, but we can at least get our heads around the main points and some of the things we can do to be helpful.
Yes, absolutely.
We're as we come to the end of the podcast, I'm going to ask you for your final thoughts. And I just wondered if, for people like me who kind of want to learn a bit and take something away that I can actually go and think about implementing in our own organisation, what would you think are the key takeaways for people like me and HR leaders as well from this whole area of how people are?
I think the really big thing is to talk. ask the right questions, ask questions of people around you, ask questions of family members who are experiencing menopause. What was it really like for you? How did that impact you at work? What could work? What could make your life easier? Because getting that real range of adjustments that you can make to offer. I mean, I believe in as flexible a working culture as possible anyway, because I think there's so many reasons why people need flexibility and can thrive when they're given a bit more autonomy over how they work. And menopause is one of those areas where until you're in it and you're experiencing it, you don't know what you need. You don't really know until somebody says, well, there's this that this might help and this might help, and we've got this suggestion and we can refer you to occupational health, or we have this counselling that we can refer you to talk about what's happening, to might have private health that somebody could, ensuring that menopause is covered in that when you're kind of renegotiating procurement contracts to make sure that menopause is something that's talked about. I think a big frustration for me is, like I said earlier, when people have menopause policies in place and yet nobody feels able to actually talk about it. So it's really bringing in that culture of support and empathy. And I think menopause is linked with many other conditions that people are ashamed about, or situations that they have that they don't feel able to talk about at work. So the more that work can be an empathetic and caring culture, the more likely it is that you'll be supporting those people and you won't be losing that great amount of talent that we lose in businesses at the moment. When women leave because of menopause.
That's a shame when that happens. Helen, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing probably just a small corner of your experience. We're really, really grateful you were able to join us today on the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. It's been lovely to be here.
Well, thank you for being part of the Unlocking Workplace Wellbeing podcast from Verve Healthcare. If you'd like to improve wellbeing in your workplace through access to mental health support, physiotherapy, private GP services, or health assessments, then we've got a solution for you. Visit us at vervehealthcare.co.uk and please be sure to subscribe. Many thanks.